Greetings, I'm Dr. Robert Duncan. I'm supposed to sort of introduce this topic to non-technical people, non-scientific people in about 10 minutes, and that's, it's a little difficult. I love great challenges. My education is multiple degrees from Harvard and Dartmouth, Ivy League schools, classes at Stanford, MIT, but my real education was in the CIA, the DARPA, and the Army, Navy, and some other institutions like the Department of Justice and the IRS. Just being shuffled around as a scientist, I got to see quite a bit of things, and I thought I was doing good for the world. I really did, and for my country, I was very patriotic. But we are here to discuss something that has been developed far long ago. I was only one of the many scientists in the area of improving the weapons capabilities of this system. And they're called neuro weapons. The good goal was supposed to be we can behaviorally modify any human being on Earth, and that includes soldiers or other humans that oppose the United States without bloodshed. Well, it turns out these weapons are far worse than nuclear weapons. They destroy the mind. They can be used for, let's say, changing gun laws in a country and create Manchurian candidates and shooters and stuff. So the CIA has been keeping this research incredibly secret for quite a long time. I got involved at a very young age, but what I'm here to do is introduce this topic with our host and to give you just a sense of just a few of the technologies that can do this. We're so advanced now, we can make you think, feel, or anything we want. So, I worked on projects such as written the artificial intelligence code, tracked the Soviet nuclear submarine fleet, voice morphing to trick enemy commanders and signal intelligence intercept, helped the federal, local, state databases for the Justice Department to be integrated. Worked on robotic surgery and medicine, a whole list of really neat and cool technologies, which also includes reading the brain signals and controlling robots. And so that really got me into the research in the last few decades of brain to computer to AI to brain networks. So it's not just brain to computer interfacing that we're studying anymore. It's how do you pipe signals in a feedback system to other brains, other AI systems. We call them hive minds or brain networks. And these have some really fascinating implications for the future of mankind. The 21st century will be known as the age of spiritual machines and soulless men. The host of this presentation is Deserie Foley, And I think she's going to talk about her experiences of being a target of some of, I just have to take a deep breath, of our research on human beings. And you can imagine that this is a war tool first, before all the beautiful and great things that can be done with it. I disagree with its secrecy, clearly. I've been an advocate for human rights and against secret torture and mind control for quite a long time as well. But the public doesn't seem to even understand what the issue is, because they don't understand the technology. They don't understand that we can control brains. Your very signals we can nudge in any direction, subliminally or overtly in many torture cases. And Deserie wanted me to give you a brief introduction to at least some of the basic concepts and technologies used to induce no-touch torture, pain in the brain, perceived as pure pain, I mean, for a human, but it does very mild physical damage, but there are secondary and tertiary health effects, obviously, from torture that can lead to death and worse. The mental scarring never goes away. So let me get started on that. I think I have about 10 minutes to do a very complex presentation, but I'll try to make it as simple as I can. Okay, let's get right into it. I need to talk about directed voice sound weapons, and it goes much deeper than that, but let's do some of the unclassified stuff. Directional sound weapons such as LRAD, which is a long-range acoustical device, is what that acronym stands for, but it's used in crowd control and can send a message at a very long distance to disperse crowds at a very loud volume. The audio spotlight is a phased array, which just means a set of transmitter speakers, and what they do is emit an ultrasonic sound that you can't hear from any individual speaker, and then they use beamforming to focus it in a very specific direction on an individual or place, or bounce it off of some other wall or object. Lots of trickery can be done with it. And it's quite clever, the inventor who created it. And I'm dividing this up into some different categories, and this is by no means a full list. I just need to go through this to show the development of where we are with our trickery of putting voices into people's heads. Bioheating is one of the very old, but it's not talked about much, technique called the Frey effect or Frey effect. It's a radio microwave spectrum hearing effect, and that what it actually does, if you ask Dr. Lin from the University of Chicago, is it heats the brain slightly, which causes it to expand, and then when the energy's gone, it contracts back. But this is done very quickly, and it vibrates the inner ear to then create the sense of sound. There have been no studies on how good that is for the brain. I assume it's a series of small concussions, but we'll remember this. It's an Army tool that they pulled off their website called V2K, and you can't block it by plugging your ears. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but biomechanical methods such as bone conductance. There are headphones which will transmit sound through your bones. You know, as a child, you probably put a spoon or fork in your mouth and then flicked it, and it sounds very loud, like it's coming right out of your ears. We can do this for with skin tissue that's close to the bone. All the bones are connected. There are ways to even heat the bone to make them vibrate, which then goes in the ear. And that's a biomechanical process for creating the perception of sound in your head. There's the electromagnetic biomechanical, and this was recently introduced by MIT, but it's been known far before that in other laboratories. And it's a laser light modulation with the atmospheric water vapor. So they modulate the laser to heat the water vapors at that specific point, which comes across as sound vibrations to the human. Now we're going to get into some more things that involve ethics, gene manipulation and insertion. And so in the public sector, we talk about blue light mice, where they've inserted a gene into the development of mice that is responsive to stimulation of the ionic channels of the neurons, and hence pulsing blue light, and that's the frequency that it's responsive to, alters the patterns of the mice brains. And, you know, we can do this in other ways. We've studied this for at least 60 years. These ionic gradient protein genes, we can do in other frequencies, or we can add magnetosensitizers. I don't know, let's use some examples, spliced into airborne viruses or vaccines. And, you know, I know there'll be a lot of conspiracy about that, but this is the way we think in the secret government. Next slide. Now, I have to cover something called hypnosis because it's very related into how we do some more sophisticated methods of encrypted neural speech. And so the CIA had an old tool called RHIC, and it stood for radio frequency hypnotic intercerebral control. And really, let's bring it down to what maybe the audience's experience of if you've ever been to a nightclub or seen a strobe light or heard what's called binaural beatings. If you look at your electroencephalograph over time, depending on the human, you will see the brain frequency match those stimuli. And I call it the firefly effect, and that's how we manipulate cultures. Everyone wants to belong, what is cool, fashionable, etc., accepted by society. It's a firefly effect, but we do it directly through neural entrainments to make people conform. I'll get into that more. Another effect you could experiment with, you close your eyes, you're in the dark, strong magnetic pulses stimulate a retinal response called the magnetic phosphenes effect, and you can see the flashing, you perceive it as a flashing light, even though there is no light. And that's just stimulating the retinal cells to emit a nerve response. The overall technique is often called frequency follows response, FFR, and it's important for a lot of, for example, in the U.S. Air Force in the 1970s and the Navy, they used it to align brain pathways for auto-association of macro and micro circuits, but they were doing brain-to-brain and then trying some brain-to-computer interfacing to control machines, to read each other's minds. It was very basic research at that time. But alignment of the pathways of the major circuitry is important. And there are many more sophisticated techniques we use today. Now, we're past the boring stuff. We get into the really interesting research that we're doing. And there is no way to separate this next method from and a gray area of secrecy. I don't know who's allowed to know about this. From cognitive modeling, the whole model of the mind. Yes, all the senses can be bypassed from the peripheral nerves. So let me go to the next slide. So in order to hack the mind or enslave it, the hack needs a known stimulus like echelon, and you'll have to look that up if you don't know. Knowing what you're listening to on radio or TV, or perhaps back to what I referred to with the Army, the microwave hearing effect, called V2K, to pipe specific speech into the inner ear's perception, which is turned into nerve impulses, grossly termed EEG, electroencephalograph, and MEG, magnetoencephalograph patterns, would also work as a starter. There are numerous ways this can be done. These are just a couple examples. Those impulses or neural responses are autocorrelated into a cognitive probability model specific to that person and influence pathways. The same effect can be achieved with direct human-to-human brain plasticity, but the technology is far beyond that now. Eventually, meanings of words are captured and so on until a nearly entire cognitive model is produced to some fidelity. These mind slaves are utilized for many intel operations unbeknownst to them. Such uses can include mass shooters who heard voices with the greater agenda unbeknownst to them to take away guns and gun rights. The entire process takes from months to years, and not just all projects are successful, depending on the complexity of their minds and external stimulus and influences. A similar technique is used in hacking, copying artificial intelligence systems, except the stimulus inputs are different and output responses, obviously. This process of discovery of biological mind requires a bidirectional stimulus, recorded response for analysis, if not done directly to another human. Every small circuit correlated to the target's biospectrum is amplified by the energy of the synaptic neural mapped out pathways for the desired effect. So not much energy is required to amplify the biosignal, as it uses the body's own natural ion regenerative mechanisms to recharge them. At this point, it is basically synthetic telepathy and what the military calls low probability detection. Just verbal commands can be issued or the inner voice of the target deciphered while they type their passwords or talk to other people. These methods are often redacted to Congress and the public for intel gathering. For a simple example, it's easy to pick out a heartbeat from the other summation of the autocorrelated biosignals, i.e., all the body, brain, electrical, and magnetic activity. Induction of higher level functions of the brain, such as hearing and other senses, are thereby achieved bypassing the peripheral nerves, but not but inducing the same perceived experience, useful for no-touch torture as an example, and that is useful for depatterning the brain and reprogramming. I don't nearly have enough time to get into details of the signal intelligence and psychological operations involved. But I assure you that it is incredibly brilliant. The most likely source of the VLF signals from ionospheric heaters, which cause extremely low frequency waves in the magnetosphere and are useful as part of the full spectrum electronic fence around the Earth, I can't talk about. It is unfortunate in order to scale this worldwide weapon system, artificial intelligent personality chatterbots, scripts are used with a twist of emotional neural pattern overlays to make them more engaging and realistic as a spiritual guide or a god, a devil, demon, alien presence, or blame other countries. But that's the psychological warfare operations divisions. Those identities are just false flag techniques, which again I don't have time to get into. But the interesting research is in the interconnectivity of multiple minds together and those hive mind groups connected to others in a much larger network, and how to influence them without their knowledge. They experience it as intuition or extra senses, which we used to call ESP, in the more subtle modes, as this following video will describe.
They had 3 monkeys with chips in their brain. Each of these monkeys can only see in 2 dimensions, 2D. But the monkeys together are rewarded with a treat, with some good food, if they can move a dot on the computer screen in 3D space to the right location. Well, each of these monkeys can't do it alone because they can only see 2D. They can't even move in 3D. But together, all 3 of those brains learn how to work together to consistently move the dot to the right 3D location. That finding is actually amazing. What it is telling us is that when multiple brains are wired together, they can perceive the world in a way that a single brain might not be able to do. They are collectively working as a single intelligence. Now, the monkeys aren't consciously aware that they are wired to other monkeys' brains. They don't have to know that. They are actually just getting the information and perceiving it intuitively.
So this is what they'll allow you to know in the civilian sector, and Duke University does a lot of these experiments on our nearest cousins. But when it's done to humans, and unfortunately we've done a lot of experiments on humans non-consensually since World War II, and they can, I call it the empathy machine. They can feel each other's pains and hear each other's inner voice, and we rewire them in a lot of different ways.